Part 100. Dressed as a farm boy, he cheated on his way out of the desert. Author, Delayed Flowering. Chapter 991. Chapter 991, Tightening the Ties of Allies. On the wedding day, Abe wore a bright red wedding dress and sat in a sedan chair. GXE also wore a bright red wedding robe and rode a white horse. He took Abe all the way from the inn to his home. Along the way, countless idlers gathered to watch the excitement, and even children clapped their hands and shouted. The Lee family was not stingy either. They threw 2 baskets of copper coins and countless wedding cakes and candies, causing more people to come and crowd them. Fortunately, Ji Yi and Liu Yang brought a group of soldiers, shouting to help open the way and protect the team, so everything went smoothly. The Lee family has never been stingy at banquets, and the dishes they prepared can be said to be well known throughout Guangzhou City. And every time there is innovation, there will be surprising and favorite dishes. This time, Tao Hongying thought about it for more than a month and presented the final dish of the recipe, Buddha jumping over the wall. Last night, a stove was set up in the corner of the kitchen yard. A half-person high clay pot was placed on it and simmered over a low fire. By the time the bride came in, the aroma could be smelled throughout the street. So much so that during the worship service, GXE could clearly hear the gurgling sound from Abe's stomach. He tried his best to hold back his laughter, sent his wife into the room, and hurried to find Wenjuan, sister-in-law. Hurry up and get some food for your sister-in-law, otherwise she will become Tianwu's first bride to faint from hunger. Wenjuan laughed so hard that she urged GXE to go to the front for a toast. She took the maid and personally went to get a bowl of Buddha jumping over the wall, paired it with rice and 2 delicious side dishes and gave it to Abe. As soon as Abe took off her hair crown, seeing Wenjuan like this, she happily hugged her. Sister-in-law, you saved my life. The maids couldn't help laughing, and the new house was filled with joy. As for the guests congratulating them today, they were focused on the food and did not bother to impress the groom, which allowed GXE to escape the catastrophe. After having had enough food and wine, the guests were about to leave. The Lee family also prepared extra souvenirs to express their gratitude. Each of the male guests received 2 bottles of fruit wine, brewed from a fruit unique to the Golden Buddha country. The female guests each had a pair of sachets with a brocade base, embroidered with the unique patterns of the Golden Buddha, and filled with a kind of dried flowers of the Golden Buddha. The cold fragrance is faint and refreshing, and it smells very good in summer. Comfortable. Everyone accepted it happily and went home satisfied. Everyone in the Lee family was tired, but they felt more at ease. Especially for Mrs. Lee, as her children and grandchildren are starting families and starting businesses, the burden on her shoulders as the parent is getting lighter and lighter. The Golden Buddha is too far away, so there is no such thing as saying that you will return home in 3 days. But on this day, Zhao Yuru personally took her daughter-in-law for a walk on the street and bought her a lot of things she liked to eat and play, which was a comfort. Abe was moved to tears and hugged her mother-in-law and shouted that she wanted to stay in the Lee family forever. She is smart by nature and is more decisive and stronger than ordinary women, otherwise she would not be able to sit in the position of Queen of the Golden Buddha. But in the final analysis, she is where she is today, mostly because of circumstances. Her father is sick, her younger brother is young, and the aristocratic family is eyeing her. If she cannot get the throne, no one in their family will survive. If she had been born in the Lee family and had someone to love and protect her, there would be no Golden Buddha queen in the world. She has been in Tianwu for 2 months and has become the granddaughter-in-law of the Lee family. She has almost forgotten her identity. It's a pity that she still has too many responsibilities to shoulder at the Golden Buddha and cannot escape them. After staying for another half-month, GXE took the things prepared by his family, loaded 7 or 8 large boats, and followed Abe back to the Golden Buddha. Even though Mrs. Lee and others were reluctant to part with him, they knew that GXE was a boy and was used to being at sea, so they soon stopped caring about him. On the contrary, Jian and the superiors sent by the imperial court began to support the Quanzhou branch of the Foreign Affairs Department. This boss's surname is Zhu. He is a seasoned official. He is prudent and very good at weighing pros and cons. This time, he brought his family members over and rented a 3-bedroom house. Quanzhou is also considered to be far away from the emperor, so many officials in the government wanted to find out the news about the imperial court through Mr. Zhu. But the door of the Zhu family was closed tightly. Except for Mr. Zhu, who went on errands in the morning and evening, the rest of the family did not see any visitors at all. Officials in the government office privately said that Mr. Zhu was unreasonable. But after Li Zhensheng heard about it, he specially found Jian to have dinner with him in his restaurant. When he talked about it, he told him, "Master Zhu is a smart man. He is worried about you and doesn't want to steal your limelight. Although he is your superior, our family has already established a foothold in Quanzhou, and he is not willing to antagonize our family." Jian nodded and responded, "Uncle is right, and I feel it. In the past few days, Master Zhu has never objected to the errands I mentioned. He also often said that I was young and had many ideas, and asked me to work harder." "Silly boy," Li Zhensheng took a piece of steamed fish to his nephew and said with a smile, "He is your boss. Once your errands are done, he will also benefit from it and share half of the credit. Of course he will encourage you to do more errands. But that's okay, you are still young, take this opportunity to do more errands and accumulate more experience. Don't worry, uncle, I'm not stupid either. I will ask Mr. Zhu for instructions on everything and ask him to sign. If I really make a big mistake, he won't be able to run away. I can't take advantage of all the good things without paying any price," and raised her hand to pour wine for her uncle, smiling narrowly. Li Zhen was finally relieved, but he had forgotten that this nephew was also a little fox. Family members say that among the 7 boys, Jia 11 is the most naughty. In fact, seriously speaking, Jia 11 is a stick, and Jian is the one behind every trouble. The uncle and nephew both enjoyed the meal very happily. When they were about to leave, Li Zhensheng asked again, "Jian, about your marriage?" Jian shook his head and said with a smile, "Uncle, I don't have any ideas about my future wife, as long as grandma and my mother like her, and of course she must be good to my sister. If I can do this, I will naturally be on the same page with her and respect each other as guests throughout my life. Although my third brother is highly valued in the Hailan army, it is not enough to tie the Tang family to our family on the same rope. Therefore, marrying Miss Tang is the best choice for me." Li Zhensheng felt a little mixed in his heart. This sounded true, but he still felt that he had wronged the child. He patted his nephew on the shoulder and responded, "You brothers are really grown up and you all know how to share the worries of the family." Jia Angxiao said sincerely, "Uncle is waiting for a few years for us brothers to grow up a bit and take over all the family affairs. Then Uncle can enjoy peace of mind." Li Zhensheng's eyes flashed with surprise, and he asked in a low voice, "When did you know this?" "Uncle, your nephew is now an official, and he is still in charge of the Foreign Affairs Department. Outsiders don't know the basics, so they just don't pay attention. How could I not know?" Jian pointed to the southeast and said, "Brother 11 also left with a mission, right?" "Uncle, you can't hide it from me anymore, it's time for me to help you." "Okay, I originally planned to take you out to sea in 2 days. I didn't expect you to find out first, Brad, I really underestimate you. Among you brothers, you are the smartest." Li Zhensheng patted his nephew twice, smiled and took him out of the door. End of this chapter. Dressed as a farm boy, he cheated on his way out of the desert. Author, Delayed Flowering. Chapter 992. Chapter 992. A friend whom we have never met. The Zindu side looks calm, but the success or failure of the northern expedition is certain, and there will definitely be big changes. As an elder brother, How could Li Zhensheng live in Quanzhou for peace and quiet at such a time? In the past few months, he has been preparing for the family's ultimate retreat. And because the retreat was at sea, it cost him a lot of energy. Now that his nephews are back and with help, he can finally breathe a sigh of relief. It's just that I hope this escape route will never be used. As the fleet of the Golden Buddha Kingdom left, envoys from other countries also rushed back to their countries with large quantities of goods and information about the power and prosperity of Tianwu. Quanzhou Pier became much quieter for a while, and everyone was still not used to it. But soon, the news of Li Jian's engagement to the Tang family's granddaughter came out, and it became a new topic on the streets. Li Jian was known to the people of Quanzhou before because he brought back a team of envoys. But compared to Li Jiaxi, who is married to the queen, he is too low-key. Now I went to Xindu, and when I came back, I suddenly became a new force. At such a young age, not only did he become the second in command of the Foreign Affairs Department, but he also became the son-in-law of the Tang family. Some people were jealous and looked for an opportunity to see what Li Jian looked like, and stopped talking after they came back. I have to say that the Li family is really blessed by God. Although they are from a peasant family, their children are very good-looking. Li Jian is not a stunningly handsome man, but he is tall, with a straight back and regular facial features, especially his eyes, which are extremely pure. In addition, he always has a smile on his face, which makes people feel like spring breeze. Facing him, no one can say anything evil. Of course, there are still some weird things. After all, the title of son-in-law of the Tang family is too tempting. Many family members in Quanzhou have been staring at it, and they will definitely not be willing to be suddenly picked. Finally, Li Jian is the biological brother of Princess Kangol, which becomes the best weakness. Why does Li Jian have no talent or virtue? It was Princess Kangol who relied on the emperor's favor to get this job in the Foreign Affairs Department for her brother. Why is it that Li Jian used his dirty tricks to seduce the Tang family's daughter through the good relationship between the two families, and then forced the Tang family to get engaged? In short, the gossip became more and more widespread, and it actually became more and more chaotic. After the Li family learned about it, they were very angry. But before they could respond, Mrs. Tang took action. This old lady is a tough girl with a fiery temper and direct and effective methods. She personally led the government soldiers to arrest the first few wealthy young men who spread the gossip, tied them up in the shopping street, and stripped them to their underpants. Then she took a whip and whipped them until they howled like ghosts. The whole people in Quanzhou can't wait to rush to watch the excitement, even worse than when the envoys from the 8 kingdoms arrived. I gave you a mouth, and you know how to spit out feces. We, the Tang family's daughter and son-in-law, can also be arranged by you. Mrs. Tang's white hair was combed into silk, she was wearing a bright red dress, her eyes were wide-eyed, and she was waving a golden whip in her hand. She was so sassy that she had no friends. The young men were in pain and ashamed, and wanted to find a crack in the ground to crawl in. At this time, it was too late for them to regret, and they could only hope that the elders in the family would come to rescue them quickly. Unfortunately, they are obviously going to be disappointed. Their grandpa came, but he stood beside Mrs. Tang with a smiling face, not daring to stop her. Not to mention the few young masters who were stunned, even the people watching were amazed. There was an elderly man who quietly explained to everyone. You don't know that when Mrs. Tang was young, she was dressed in red and with a white horse, and she was so heroic she was also a heroine who killed pirates. Almost all the men in Quanzhou city admired her and wanted to marry her home. It's just that in the end, I was hugged by General Tang to be a beautiful woman. I don't know how many people got drunk and cried. These few people in front of me are all one of the original admirers. Now their descendants have angered Mrs. Tang, and they dare not save her. Maybe I'll beat these guys again after I get home. Everyone suddenly realized it, and the fire of gossip in their eyes burned even more intensely. Mrs. Tang is old after all, and she will be tired after smoking for a while. Mrs. Tang was a smart person. She sent people to Li's house early to invite Mrs. Li. At this time, she happened to set up a ladder and asked her mother-in-law to step down. So the soldiers pushed aside the crowd, and Mrs. Li walked in holding Tao Hongying's arm. "Old girl, why are you so angry?" Old Mrs. Li joked. "I'm old now, and my face has as many wrinkles as furrows on the ground. You're still so angry. You look really older than me. I still look old." Sure enough, Mrs. Tang threw down the whip in her hand, pulled it and replied, "It's not like these little beasts think that our Tang family is easy to bully. They dare to make up any swear words. If we don't teach them a lesson, our Tang family will be bullied. Just knead it into dough." Mrs. Li advised, "They are just some kids talking nonsense. Why bother with them? Besides, they also scolded my boy, but just scold me. My brother-in is not going to run errands every day, but he is still engaged and waiting to marry your precious granddaughter. Teach these boys a lesson and let them remember it. If you care about them too much, we will all lose our status." Mrs. Tang was coaxed into laughing, and turned around to glare at the boys. The boys were beaten with marks on their bodies. The injuries were not serious, but they were very painful and they were also very embarrassed. She felt a little relieved, and then said, "Okay, let them go this time." After saying that, she turned to look at the elders of the boys and the people around her, and said loudly, "Our Tang family and the Li family got married because I fell in love with the boys of the Li family. My precious granddaughter is getting married. I don't care about any family, but I would be happy only if he is sent to the Li family's home. This marriage was obtained by me in every possible way. If I ever hear someone say a bad word in the future, don't blame me for breaking down your door. If you don't believe it, just give it a try." Everyone shrank their necks, laughed dryly and did not dare to speak. Old Mrs. Li was naturally happy to hear her defending her grandson, and pulled her out. "You have such a straightforward and fierce temper. If my little granddaughter were here, I would probably have to be friends with you forever. She is also like this, the most unbearable to be wronged, and she should not retaliate on the spot if she has hatred." "Really? Then you must let me meet your precious granddaughter in the future." Mrs. Tang took Mrs. Li's arm, and the two got into the carriage talking and laughing. Tao Hongying and Mrs. Tang followed behind, and the mother-in-law and daughter-in-law went to eat freshly baked snacks among the white clouds. The crowd was left with no excitement to watch, so they quickly dispersed. Several injured boys wore random clothes and were scolded all the way home by their elders. Here in Zindu, as summer enters, the weather is really getting hotter day by day. Jiyan came out of the palace and planned to go back to the Earl's mansion for a visit. But halfway through, she remembered that she hadn't been to the Marquis mansion for a long time, so she turned around. The housekeeper didn't know what he was busy with. When Jiyan entered the Marquis mansion, he was nowhere to be seen. Jiyan was very surprised. He asked the steward and found the granary in the backyard. The butler's brows were so frowned that he could kill a fly. When he saw the good news, he was like a homeless child meeting his relatives, and he felt even more aggrieved. 2 updates today. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Dressed as a farm boy, he cheated on his way out of the desert. Author, Delayed Flowering. Chapter 993. Chapter 993. The army rations were destroyed. "Princess, have you also heard the news?" The chief steward was obviously anxious and started chattering. "What should we do? How come so much food is wasted? A good boat is flooded every day, but why does it leak while transporting food? Someone must have tampered with it. I don't know which evil creature did it, If I knew, this old slave would really want to eat his flesh and drink his blood. The Marquis is leading his soldiers to fight outside, and no one can help him, but he still wants to hold him back so viciously. Hand heard the good news, he was confused, but instinctively felt that something was not good. Uncle Steward, please speak slowly, what happened? The housekeeper was stunned for a moment, and finally realized that Ji-yin's expression was not right, and he regretted it at that time. Maybe the Li family was afraid that the princess would become anxious, so they didn't tell the princess yet, but he let it slip first. But having said it all, it is too late to hide it now. He could only say, the old slave also just learned the news. The second batch of military rations to be sent to the north of the Yangtze River was boarded at the dock. However, when it reached the middle of the river, the cabin actually leaked and sank into the water. These grains were collected by various state governments. Even if they can be collected again, it will take half a month before they can be shipped. The Marquis has brought an army of 100,000 people to the north of the Yangtze River. He cannot go hungry for half a month. What should we do? The big housekeeper stomped his feet angrily. Ji-yin was also blue in the face. Needless to say, someone must have deliberately caused trouble when the ship sank. Just as the steward said, the ships going back and forth from the north to the south of the Yangtze River were running smoothly every day, but why did something go wrong when transporting grain, and all the military grain was sunk in the river? There are two ships in one. It can be said that they are not maintained and taken care of on weekdays. Those were dozens of ships. They all sank. It was not man-made. Could it be that water ghosts appeared? The chief steward was afraid that the princess would be angry, so he suppressed his anxiety and advised, "Princess, don't worry too much. There is still 1,000 tons of grain stored in the house. I will send someone to sort it out right now." Ji-yin shook his head and said, "It's just a drop in the bucket. Uncle housekeeper, don't mess around. Let's keep these grains for the people in the house. I'll go to my second uncle and Mr. Wen first to ask what's going on and see if they have any countermeasures." Having said that, she turned and left. The butler hurriedly followed behind to see her off, repeatedly instructing, "Princess, this old slave will stay in the house. If you need my best efforts for something, you must send someone to say hello." "Okay, Uncle Housekeeper, don't worry." Ji-yin hurriedly got on the carriage and ran to find his second uncle. Li Lauer didn't study much and didn't take the scientific examination route. Even if he became an uncle, he was often ostracized and ridiculed at the beginning. But in his young days, when his eldest brother disappeared and he was forced to mature early, he learned to deal with things tactfully and shrewdly without a teacher. In addition, there are many flower lovers who come and go in Baiwan. The Li family has been prosperous in recent years, and the Holy Family is also deep. Therefore, he gradually became familiar with Liu Bu and made many friends. At noon, as soon as he came out of the Ministry of War, he saw his niece waiting outside. He quickly stepped forward and said, "Let's go home." Ji-yin followed her second uncle into the car. As soon as the car door closed, she immediately asked, "Second uncle, what's going on? Do you know who destroyed the military rations?" Li Lauer's brows were furrowed like iron knots, and he responded in a low voice, "What happened this time is very strange. We originally guessed that it was the old woman who did it, but her minions outside are all being watched closely. Recently, it has definitely there is no action. This is strange. If we didn't make a mistake, a third party would have intervened. Moreover, spies could be placed in the dock barracks, otherwise we would never be able to do such a big thing." "Uncle Daong, has the investigation started?" Ji-yin asked. "Of course," Li Lauer sighed, "this happened last night. Your Uncle Daong sealed the dock overnight. I've asked Zheng He to take a look. Daong thinks he missed something important. His eyes are red. He doesn't eat or sleep. He has been conducting strict interrogations." "What did Uncle Huang say?" Ji Yin hit the nail on the head and asked the most important question. Place. Li Lao's heart skipped a beat and he couldn't help but want to sigh. In the past few years, my niece had gotten along well with the emperor. She was as close to her uncle as she was to her, but with more respect. But ever since before the northern expedition, my niece has vaguely shown some distrust of the emperor. In front of outsiders, of course she didn't expose herself at all. But in front of family members like them, her subconscious expressions and words can be clearly felt in many cases. Although he also knew that the emperor was ruthless, he always felt that maybe the current emperor would be an exception. After all, the emperor's current status is almost dependent on the independent support of the Marquis, not only family ties, but also kindness. As a result, he did not expect to be slapped in the face so quickly. The emperor was very angry and ordered the Ministry of War to investigate. He also went to the state capitals again to collect grain and prepared to transport it again in half a month. In addition, the emperor sent someone to send a message to the Marquis, asking him to hold on for half a month. Ji Yin was angry at the time. What are you talking about? What can those drunkards in the Ministry of War investigate? Even if they can really investigate, it will take a year and a half. If these hidden cancers are allowed to exist, we don't know how to provide support to the Northern Expeditionary Army in the future. What a stumbling block! Furthermore, none of the aristocratic families in Zindu have tens of thousands of dans of grain in storage. Just a few of them can put together enough to replenish the military rations and transport them away immediately. Why are they waiting for the state governments to collect them? What does it mean to persist for half a month? The situation on the battlefield is changing rapidly, and thousands of lives may be lost if you are not careful. Can that be solved by persisting? Alas, Li Lao sighed and comforted his niece. Don't worry, the Marquis has been on the battlefield for a long time. This time the battle line is so long, he will definitely be able to deal with it in advance. Besides, I have discussed with Mr. Wen, and tomorrow I will go with your uncle Daong to borrow food from various aristocratic families. Each aristocratic family has children and grandchildren in the army, and I believe they do not want their children and grandchildren to starve. In this way, the food will be shipped out in less than 3 days. Just wait until the food collected by each state capital arrives, and then return it to each family. Ji Yin, thinking about it carefully, this is actually a good idea. In fact, she has a lot of food in her space, enough to make up for the loss of military rations immediately. But this is her trump card, a trump card that is not bound by anyone, a trump card that can reverse the situation by surprise. It is not yet the critical moment and cannot be taken out. Ji Yin responded, "Second uncle, this is a good idea. Just go ahead and do it. If you need help, please let me know. I still have to go back to the palace in the afternoon. My adoptive father is not here, so you can't enter the palace. I want to keep a closer eye on you." Li Lao was a little worried, but he couldn't stop it even if he wanted to. He could only say, "This matter is of great importance. There may be many hidden things that are not as simple as what appears on the surface. You must think twice before doing anything. The most important thing is to protect yourself and don't let yourself get involved. Do you understand?" "I understand, don't worry," second uncle Ji Yin responded solemnly. Soon, the carriage arrived at the Earl's mansion. Wanner didn't know that the rations for the Northern Expeditionary Army had been destroyed. She was very happy to see her father-in-law and sister-in-law coming back, and made preparations for lunch. But after a while, Mr. Wen also came back. When the food was served on the table, Li Lao-san and Jia Huan stepped in the door. Even a fool knew something was wrong at this time. End of this chapter. Dressed as a farm boy, he cheated on his way out of the desert. Author, Delayed Flowering. Chapter 994. Chapter 994, Fight side by side and never lose. At lunchtime, when the restaurant is busy, the chef Jia Huan will not leave easily. Li Lao-san is even dozens of miles away and will not come back if nothing happens. Jiyan didn't want her sister-in-law to worry about her, so she simply said a few words, made an excuse, and asked her to prepare 2 boxes of snacks for herself, and take them with her when she returns to the palace later. Wanner went to work quickly. They all sat together and discussed the matter of borrowing food while eating. Although each family has children and grandchildren in the Northern Expedition Army, in the final analysis, the interests of the family come first, and it is impossible to sacrifice too much for one child or grandson. So, in order to successfully lend money and food, Li Yong had to go to see the emperor and ask for a handwriting, and Li Lao also came forward together. In this way, only when the military comes forward, the emperor appreciates the favor, and the Li family endorses it, will each family be willing to borrow food. After the discussion was completed, Jiyan quickly returned to the palace with the snack box in hand. In order to cultivate the relationship between his future son-in-law and his daughter, the emperor had previously decided to allow Luzon to enter the palace on the 1st and 15th day of each month to have a meal with the third princess and stroll in the garden. Hearing that the good news was coming back, the third princess was worried about it and immediately had people lead the good news to the garden. Jiyan saw that Luzon was also there, and then he remembered the date at the palace, so he smiled and said, "Oh, it's unlucky that I came back, and it delayed the important event." The third princess blushed, pinched her fair face in a show-off manner, and said angrily, "When you find a husband in the future, I will laugh at you as hard as I can." Jiyan waved his hands nonchalantly and said with a smile, "I don't know how many years it will take, but I'm not afraid." After saying that, she asked Shuiling to open the box and share the snacks brought by her family with the third princess and Luzon. Luzon smiled lightly, raised his hand to pour tea for Jiyan, and asked, counting the days, "Brother Li should have arrived, right? Have you sent a letter to your family?" Jiyan shook his head and replied, "I haven't received the letter yet. It's a long journey, so I must have been delayed somewhere. But I've always been careful, so there's no need to worry too much." Luzon nodded and said, "That day when I sent Brother Li away, he entrusted us to take more care of you. If you have something to do in the future, feel free to send someone to look for us. Don't be polite. Don't worry, Brother Lu. I will definitely trouble you less if I have something to do." Jiyan smiled and leaned on the third princess's shoulder. "Before, you were like my brother, and from now on you will be my brother-in-law." The third princess's face turned even redder, and she stretched out her hand to scratch her itch. Jiyan quickly begged for mercy, laughing so hard that the flowers were trembling. Luzon also laughed when he saw it from the opposite side, lowered his head and took a sip of tea. After a few jokes like this, Jiyan will return to Highland Palace and make room for the two of them. Luzon said goodbye first. "It's getting late, so I'll go back first. I'll see the princess, and the princess sister next time." The third princess was a little reluctant to part with her. She pinched the corner of her clothes and said, "Your Majesty, please sit down for a while. I'll have someone stew some desserts." "Your Majesty, please have a bowl before leaving." Luzon smiled and apologized, and replied, "I'm sorry, Princess. I didn't know, you specially stewed the dessert. Yesterday I made an appointment with a friend to attend his birthday party tonight. When I first arrived in Zindu, he helped me a lot, so I couldn't refuse." "Ah, then it's really hard for you to be absent, so go quickly. Next time you come over, you might as well have dessert with me." The third princess quickly stopped talking and urged Luzon to hurry up to the banquet. Luzon smiled tenderly, bent down to salute, then nodded with Jiyan, and left. The third princess also returned to Highland Palace with Jiyan on her arm. They talked about how good Luzon was all the way, which showed that her heart was completely broken. On the other hand, I smiled and listened to the good news, always a little distracted. The third princess found out and asked, "Are you worried about the Marquis and your father?" Jia Yin came back to his senses and responded, "Do you also know that the army rations were destroyed?" The third princess nodded. "After you left this morning, there was news in the palace. Later, Prince Lu came and said a few words to me. I don't know who committed the murder. I'm so hateful. I hope my father will find this person and cut him into pieces." Ji Yin wanted to find the person behind the scenes more than she did, so she said, "In the past few days, you should help me and go to the imperial study room more often. Even if you can't see Uncle Huang, you can still hear some news. Don't worry, it's a trivial matter. You don't need to tell me, I will help." The third princess nodded vigorously, then hugged her to comfort her. "Don't worry, the northern expedition is about the unification of Tianwu's north and south. I don't know how many people are worried and putting in a lot of effort. Military rations will definitely be solved soon." Ji Yin sighed, "I hope so. The entire Tianwu is now like a huge whirlpool. Once it spins, it can only spin faster and faster, and the exposed black holes will become bigger and bigger. No one can predict when it will calm down." After dark, after dinner, Ji Yin returned to the side hall early on the pretext of having a headache, then let the little fox go out, and has been waiting. Sure enough, at the third watch, the window was pushed open. Muju jumped in a panic, took the teapot and started drinking. Ji Yin didn't say a word and quickly prepared food for him. In the warm tea basket in the corner of the room, there were warm millet porridge and a dozen meat buns. They were all brought to the table. Muju ate 3 or 4 in one go before speaking. "Don't worry, it's not serious." Ji Yin gave him new tea, nodded and said, "You eat first, no matter how urgent it is, it won't take more than this time." This morning, when she was about to leave the palace and go home, she saw no sign of Muju. She thought he was delayed for something, but when she came home and heard that there was something wrong with the supplies of the Northern Expeditionary Army, she immediately guessed that he might have heard the news last night and went to inquire about it. Sure enough, Muju had enough to eat and drink, so he explained it to her carefully. At 5 o'clock, an urgent secret message came from the riverside. The emperor was in the imperial concubine's palace, so there would be a lot of noise. I felt something was wrong, so I secretly went over to listen. Then I went to the riverside pier again and made inquiries around Kyoto. He took a breath, and his usually bright eyes were a little dim, showing that he was very tired. "This thing is very strange. It is indeed not the one from Shaokong Palace who did it. Her few scoundrels who have the ability to do anything in the army are all honest. They must also be wondering at this moment who took the lead. But the impact of this incident is extremely bad. A great victory in the northern expedition, the recapture of Jiangbei, and the unification of the country. Such great achievements are like a fat pig, surrounded by wolves, and everyone wants a piece of meat. Now some wolves have begun to speak, as if sending a signal. More wolves will join in the future. You can escape once, but no one can guarantee that everything will be safe every time." Ji Yin had a bad look on his face. He raised his head and pointed in the direction of the royal study, and whispered, "Am I wrong? I don't think that person was too careful." Muju also frowned. The sly smile that often hung on his lips had long since disappeared, replaced by an unprecedented seriousness. "I thought I was the only one who felt this way. Fortunately, you think so too. That person can't say he didn't care. He ordered a thorough investigation and recollected military rations. He did it all. But it was just within the rules and he couldn't make any mistakes. But he just couldn't. A mistake is actually a mistake." Ji Yin nodded, feeling finally relieved. She doesn't want to think about the evil in people's hearts, but sometimes she has to think about it. This is a heavy burden on her heart. Fortunately, there are still people who think like her. "Brother Mu, we will live in the palace permanently from now on. My adoptive father and my father are away at war, so we can't help them, but at least we must try our best to protect them from being attacked from both sides. No matter who wants to do harm to them, I will not allow it. So, no matter what happens to us in the future, at least this time, I hope you can fight side by side with me and never lose anything. Ji-Yin stretched out her hand, Muju lowered his head, glanced at her green fingers, and shook it without hesitation. 2 updates today. End of this chapter. Dressed as a farm boy, he cheated on his way out of the desert. Author, Delayed Flowering. Chapter 995. Chapter 995, Sharing Joys and Sorrows and Sharing Fate. The cardamom girl has her black hair with only a jade hairpin inserted into it. The dim candlelight shines through the jade hairpin and falls on her cheeks, filling her face with brilliance and touching beauty. Muju's heart beat as if a drum was beating, making his blood surge. Such a major event involving countless lives and deaths, if other women encountered it, they would probably panic and wipe away tears. But the girl in front of her was so determined and so high-spirited. She said she wanted to fight alongside him, so, fight. The warm breeze in early summer never misses such beautiful moments. It sneaks in quietly from the window and honestly bears witness. Love at first sight in this world is always about lust. If you want a long-lasting and unbreakable relationship, you must share the joys and sorrows. It was late at night, the lights in the house were extinguished, and only Ji-Yin was left. But she still didn't sleep until the white figure of the little fox came in. Ji-Yin hugged the little fox and started chatting while feeding it grapes. There is no airtight wall in the world, let alone such a big thing as the destruction of military supplies. The northern expedition not only carried the emperor's desire to unify the mountains and rivers, but also the people's desire to regain their homeland. Over the years, many elderly people have been talking about their hometown and old friends in Jiangbei when they are dying. They want to be buried back in their ancestral graves and worshipped in their hometown. These are their only last words. Xintinghao led the Northern Expeditionary Army and went northward every year, driving the barbarians northward bit by bit, like a millstone, consuming the barbarians' vitality. After spending countless blood and lives, the decisive battle has finally come this year. The whole country is looking forward to and paying attention to this. As a result, there are still people under such circumstances, under the noses of Xinda people, stumbling upon the Northern Expeditionary Army, hoping that the Northern Expeditionary Army will starve and fight the barbarians. How vicious and despicable. This is treason. In a tea house, a middle-aged scribe slammed his tea bowl on the table, his face red and neck thick with anger. Several friends at the same table were also very angry and responded one after another. That is, if I knew who was behind such despicable means, I would definitely write a 30-page crusade against him, so that all his ancestors would be ashamed to reincarnate. Such evil thieves really deserve to be cut to pieces by 1,000 swords. It's a pity that we, the scholars, don't have the power to restrain the chickens, otherwise we would have personally escorted the military supplies northward. Those people in the Ministry of War don't know when they will find someone to take action. But some people said, could it be that the barbarians sent scouts here to make us suspicious of each other and disrupt the new capital? But someone immediately retorted, it's impossible. In the past few years, the Marquis has opened 3 lines of defense in Jiangbei. It's impossible for the barbarians to come quietly. Even if this matter is embarrassing, I still have to say that there must be a traitor in our Tianwu. In various markets and streets, people are also talking about it. This life is not getting better. We are not afraid that there will be no good things, but we are afraid that there will be no good people. The Marquis and the others are killing the enemy in the front, but there are these rotten fish and shrimps behind them, which is really annoying. That's right, I really want to use a butcher's knife to skin and carve out the skin of this bastard. Some well-informed people said, I heard that the general of the Northern Expedition Army and Uncle Li are borrowing grain from each noble family. They plan to transport it to Jiangbei first, and then wait for the grain from each state capital to be transferred before returning it. Really? This is a good idea. I still have a load of rice at home, and I want to give it to the Northern Expeditionary Army first. Me too, me too. I have 2 loads at home. I originally stocked up on rice while it was cheap, but now it really comes in handy. I don't have much rice at home, but I have potatoes. I'm going to ask if I can give them to the Northern Expeditionary Army to feed their horses. Everyone talked and hurried to the entrance of the military department. Unfortunately, the threshold of the gate is high, and anyone is willing to greet these flat people. The people had no choice but to find the relief agency in the end. It happened that Li Lauer came back to pick up something, so he quickly thanked everyone when he saw this. Thank you to the folks for caring so much about the Northern Expeditionary Army. If Jiangbei is recovered safely, most of the credit must go to the folks. After all, with everyone's strong support, the soldiers and generals can rest assured to kill the enemy at the front. The people were happy to hear this and waved their hands modestly. Uncle, your words are serious, we should do this. That's right, we can't kill the enemy, but we can do a little help. Li Lauer smiled again and handed over his hands, and finally tried to dissuade him. I know everyone is sincere, but for the time being, we have collected enough military rations, and they can be sent to Jiangbei in the future. Everyone, please keep the rice and food at home for now. If we don't have enough military rations in the future, I will go to the street in person to ask everyone for help. Okay. Have you really collected enough food? This is great, these high-ranking families are finally generous this time. We listen to my uncle. The Northern Expedition is led by the Marquis, and General Li is also there. We really need food, and my uncle will not be polite to us. That's it, uncle, let's go first. Everyone chatted for a while and then left one after another. Li Lauer stood in front of the door and saw everyone off, but did not speak for a long time. Zheng He stepped forward and whispered, Uncle, no wonder people say that every time a person slaughters dogs for justice, most of them will be a scholar. These villagers only had 1 or 2 loads of food at home, yet they were willing to donate it to the Northern Expeditionary Army without any pity or hesitation. Look at those high-ranking families. Borrowing food from them is not in vain. They actually want to have a name in front of the emperor and gain favors from our family. In the end, it is their children who are saved. They are really greedy. It's annoying. Li Lauer also felt uncomfortable when he thought about what he had experienced for most of the day. But now the situation is not good, and stability is the top priority. It's not time to worry about these little things. Let's settle the food issue first. The Marquis and the others are fighting at the front, which is much more difficult than for us. In addition, send a message to Bianjian, asking them to make more ice bricks and add some honey juice. Children from the relief department who have no work go to the streets to sell their goods, just to make a profit. The weather is getting hotter and hotter, so it helps to cool down the heat for everyone. Yes, Uncle Zheng, he responded immediately. In the afternoon, cicadas were already chirping everywhere in the palace. On the tall and lush trees, cicadas are hiding in unknown corners, screaming incessantly, which is annoying. But in the side hall of Highland Palace, the good news swept away the boredom, and he happily asked Muju, seriously? We have collected enough food and have distributed it? Muju wiped his sweat and replied, of course, I saw the loading of the ship with my own eyes. This time General Li Yong personally escorted him to Jiangbei without any delay. That's great, Ji Yan breathed a sigh of relief. Although he was 4 or 5 days late, with his adoptive father's caution and years of experience in battles, this would never delay the campaign or shake the morale of the army. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Dressed as a farm boy, he cheated on his way out of the desert. Author, Delayed Flowering. Chapter 996. Chapter 996. The first rule of survival in the palace. Muju poured a bowl of tea to moisten his throat. He also thought about joking and said, "My uncle has people selling ice bricks on the street. The business is really good. It's a penny a piece, and almost every kid on the street has one. Many craftsmen and farmers who come to the city also buy it. Everyone says that our family is kind-hearted. Such precious ice is sold so cheaply just to relieve everyone from the heat." Just as he was about to respond to the good news, the third princess came through the wind and rain corridor with her maid. Muju jumped up and climbed onto the rafter. Jiyan also went out to greet him and asked, "It's so hot, why did you find it? I've been waiting for a long time, but you haven't come over yet, so I came to take a look." The third princess's face was red and she looked around with some disappointment in her eyes. "Didn't you say you made ice cream?" Jiyan was so funny that he opened the small wooden box next to the table. The wooden box was lined with a thick quilt, and two small glazed bowls were hidden in the quilt. The bowls were filled with 5-color ice cream balls, which looked extremely delicious. The third princess stamped her feet happily, and the golden phoenix on her head made a tinkling sound when she walked. "Good news, give me a bowl to eat first. Woohoo, I'm too hot. If I don't eat a bowl of ice cream, I'm afraid I won't be able to walk to the study room." The good news was so funny that I immediately took out a bowl. The third princess cheered, took the spoon handed by Shuiling, took a big bite, and then narrowed her eyes with a smile. "You don't know, since you made this thing the day before yesterday and I tasted it, my mouth is watering in my dreams. Wow, I finally ate it again. Good news, please make it for me every day from now on, otherwise I won't be able to survive this summer." While talking, she gave Jiyan another mouthful to please. Jiyan ate it, but it didn't satisfy her, so he responded, "A woman can't eat too much cold food. Be careful if you get a stomachache and regret it. From now on, eat a bowl every other day and no more." The third princess knows Jiyan's temper and will definitely do what she says, and there is no point in acting coquettishly. Although this sister is younger than her, she never dares to act like an elder sister. As for the princess's airs, she doesn't know where to throw them. "Okay, one bowl every other day is fine. Then the next day I want to eat strawberry flavor, a big bowl." She could only compromise. "Okay, this is easy," Jiyan agreed happily. They met each other, chatted and laughed, ate ice cream, tidied up briefly, and then carried the insulated box to the royal study. Before going out, Jiyan glanced at the beams of the house and saw Muju with a pitiful face and eyes full of accusations. Jiyan was funny, and he glanced vaguely at the cabinet in the corner of the room. Seeing that no one was in the room, Muju jumped off the rafter and ran to open the cupboard. Sure enough, there was a small wooden box there, which contained ice cream that was about to melt. His favorite peach flavor. In the side hall of the imperial study, Manager Feng took off his boots because of the heat and was lying on a rocking chair to rest. Two young eunuchs were fanning him, making him feel very at ease. Suddenly he heard that the third princess and the good news had arrived. He quickly got up, even wearing his boots backwards. "Oh, princess, princess. Why are you two here on such a hot day? If you have something to do, ask the palace servants to send a message, and I can just go and listen to the instructions." Eunuch Feng was as flattering as ever, but his tone was also transparent. A touch of intimacy. After all, when the palace was sealed, he lived with these two masters in Highland Palace for more than 10 days, eating and drinking, and gained 5 or 6 pounds. This friendship is also real. The third princess is a naturally noble girl and has her own arrogance. Even if she wants to say something polite, her tone is firm. "It's an unlucky thing that we came here and delayed Eunuch Feng from enjoying the cool weather. Don't dare, don't dare. The old slave is lazy and neglects the princess." Eunuch Feng apologized and wanted to welcome the two of them into the room to sit down, but Jiyan stopped him with a smile. "Eunuch Feng, the princess and I also had nothing to do. We made some ice cream and sent it to Uncle Huang to relieve the heat. But why is there no one in the royal study? Did Uncle Huang go to the garden? She is already beautiful and smart, and she talks and laughs like this, which makes everyone happy when they see her. Eunuch Feng quickly responded, the princess and the princess are really thoughtful. If the emperor knew about it, he would definitely be happy. Unfortunately, your majesty, well, your majesty went to the imperial concubine's place to take a nap and has not come back yet. The third princess's face turned cold at that moment. Just when she was about to say something, Ji Yin beat her to it. That's a pity, we have walked all the way and the ice point may have melted by half. If we send it to the imperial concubine's palace, it may have completely melted. How about Eunuch Feng helping to eat it? We can cook it for Uncle Huang next time. Ah, Eunuch Feng was flattered, but extremely happy. As the deputy chief eunuch, he actually has no shortage of ice, nor food and drink. But for such a novelty as ice cream, you can tell that it was made by the princess. That must be delicious. Thank you so much to the princess and the princess, the old slave deserves it. Eunuch Feng quickly took the wooden box. The third princess turned around and left. Kai-un quickly followed and whispered advice. Ji Yin was 2 steps behind. He chatted for a few words with Eunuch Feng, who was seeing him off, and then said goodbye with a smile before catching up. The third princess wiped the sweat from her head. I came to deliver food to my father under the bright sun, and he actually ran to see that vixen again. If I had known, I wouldn't have come, and I won't come in the future. Ji Yin smiled and hugged her, took out a mint candy from his small bag and stuffed it into her mouth. The sweet and cool taste immediately made the third princess smile. Oh, what kind of candy is this? It's so cool, give me another one. The third princess turned into a robber, snatched a pack of mints from Ji Yin, and ran ahead happily. Ji Yin walked slowly behind, glanced over the high wall at the roof of the royal study, then lowered his eyes slightly, hiding all the complications and regrets. Eunuch Feng watched the princess and her entourage leave. He wiped his sweat and complained softly, the weather is too hot. It's not going to be a drought. The little following behind smiled and responded, Chief Manager, we don't care whether there is a drought or not. We are just thinking about the ice cream made by the princess. You, old man, are kind-hearted and open your children's eyes. The princess is very clever and ingenious. The snacks and food she sent to the emperor were so greedy every time, and she will definitely not go wrong this time. Eunuch Feng smiled and cursed, his face was full of pride, and he started to walk back into the house. As a result, an old in grey clothes suddenly walked out from behind the pillars on one side of the house. He only glanced at Eunuch Feng, and Eunuch Feng shivered. He hurried over, nodded and listened to a few words, then ran back to pick up the wooden box and sent it over again. The old in grey carried the box and soon disappeared. The little eunuchs were all surprised and confused when they saw this. When Eunuch Feng came back, someone couldn't help but ask, Manager, who is that person? How did you? Eunuch Feng slapped the little who spoke on the head and cursed in a low voice, if you want to survive, just remember my words. You didn't see anything just now. The little eunuchs were startled, and they all shrank their necks and pretended to be mute. The first rule of survival in the palace is, you should never ask anything you shouldn't ask. The more you know, the faster you will die. 2 updates today. End of this chapter. Dressed as a farm boy, he cheated on his way out of the desert. Author, Delayed Flowering. Chapter 997. Chapter 997. The blood debt must be repaid with blood. The distant Jiangbei border is not as warm as the Jiangnan side. The wild grass here has just put green on the hillside, and the trees have also taken out their branches and swayed in the wind. In previous years, hard-working farmers would have been busy in the fields, sowing seeds for a year's worth of crops. However, due to 10 years of barbarian occupation, almost every inch of land in Jiangbei was stained with blood and lost its vitality. This land has witnessed too much suffering. There were innocent people who were slowed down in their escape and had their heads chopped off by barbarian sabers. There were also women and children who were lucky enough to survive but were wantonly tortured to death by the barbarians. Moreover, the Northern Expeditionary Army roared angrily and stood proud. Of course, the most common ones are the mutilated limbs, blood, and unwillingness of the barbarians. Blood debts still need blood to repay. There are still 800 miles away from the original border, and the Northern Expeditionary Army built a camp to defend it. As night fell, torches were everywhere, making crackling sounds and illuminating the entire camp as bright as day. There are soldiers washing the horses, feeding them with grass and food, and taking good care of them. There were also soldiers carrying water to clean pots and chopping wood to light fires. Thanks to the high yield of grain, Tianwu has been recuperating for so many years, which not only provides food and clothing for the people, but also provides much better food for the army. Add water to a large iron pot, boil the finely chopped corn crumbs to half, then add half a pot of white rice, a large pot of potato cubes, a large pot of cabbage, and finally sprinkle a handful of fine salt, and you have a complete dinner. Each soldier received a large bowl and chatted and laughed around the campfire, which was quite lively. If it weren't for the cool breeze and the occasional howling of wolves in the distance, I might have mistakenly thought that this was a gathering with relatives in the courtyard of my home. Speaking of the wolf in the distance, everyone's appetite is a little bit off. The barbarians are not as ferocious as the Tianwu people, and they cannot make smoke everywhere. So, the tigers, leopards and wolves that had retreated to the mountains and forests because of the human war all came down the mountains one after another. Especially for wolves, they fought together and cooperated tacitly, and the group expanded more and more, gradually becoming a pest in Jiangbei. Every time a war breaks out, the corpses that were too late to be buried, or those that were buried shallowly, will be dug out by them and feasted on. In the long run, these wolves are no longer considered wolves. At night, their eyes are green, coupled with their strong bodies and cold white teeth, they look like evil ghosts from hell. Compared to the barbarians, the Northern Expeditionary Army did not want to encounter such evil wolves. The curtain of the Central Army tent was raised, and Li Laosi was holding a bowl of porridge, squatting at the door and snoring while eating, listening to the howling of wolves in the distance, frowning tightly. The Marquis in the tent finished working on the documents in his hands and came out with a bowl of porridge. With quick eyes and quick hands, Yeshan picked up a peeled salted duck egg and put it into the Marquis bowl. Just as Mr. Ho was about to speak, Yeshan had already escaped. Li Laosi looked back and saw it, and smiled and said, "Master Ho, eat it. Fu Niuer brought this specially for us. I have already eaten one." The Marquis didn't say anything, just drank the porridge with the oily salted duck eggs. A group of soldiers passed by the tent door. Seeing this, they all saluted, then raised their heads and continued their inspection. Most of them are veterans, although they have long known that the Marquis and generals eat and sleep like them and never do anything special. But every time I see it, I still can't help but get excited. The Marquis is such a rich and noble man, and he is actually willing to drink vegetable porridge like them. The whole army shares the joys and sorrows together, why worry about not winning the northern expedition? After the Marquis finished the porridge in 2 or 3 mouthfuls, he called his soldiers to gather together to discuss the arrangements for dispatching troops in the next few days. As a result, before he could open his mouth, there was the sound of horse hooves, and the official documents from the new capital were sent in a hurry from 800 miles away. House opened it and took a look, and his expression changed. Li Laosi looked anxiously, and there were no outsiders in the tents on either side. He grabbed the official document directly, and after reading it in a few glances, he became annoyed. What happened to Daong? He actually allowed people to destroy the army rations in front of his eyes. The Marquis also frowned, and after a long pause he replied, "It's normal for Li Yong to be unable to guard against it, whether by calculation or not. Besides, who would have thought that someone would sink the ship and sink the grain? Everyone's protection was on the road, and we didn't expect that something would happen at our doorstep. Li Laozi also knew this, but he couldn't help but be impatient. Do you want me to go back quickly to collect military supplies? The Marquis shook his head. No need for the moment. I was worried that the front line would be stretched too long and there would be problems with supplies, so the rear camp had been distributing supplies according to the 70% quota. The remaining food reserves are estimated to last for more than 20 days, and there is no worry of running out of food for the time being. However, this news should not be revealed, as it may easily shake the morale of the army. Li Laozi walked around the ground twice and finally asked, Master Marquis, the Emperor only said to let various places remobilize grain, which will delay half a month, and it will take at least more than a month to transport it again. There is a difference of more than 10 days during this period. The Emperor will not understand it, but this arrangement. The Marquis shook his head slightly, then looked at the night sky in the distance, and replied after a while, there will be some consequences for the foreign troops. Likewise, we are not in the new capital. It's hard to guess what the specific situation will be. Don't worry, I have left some manpower, and I will send news from home. You will know when the time comes. At this time, Zhang Chen and the other generals gathered around after hearing this. The Marquis and Li Laozi had a tacit understanding and did not mention what they had just said. They only said that there was a delay in the army rations and asked everyone to keep it secret. The daily food quota for logistics will be reduced by another 10%. Everyone is in a bad mood. They tie their heads to their trousers and bleed and sacrifice themselves. They fight on the front without asking for support from their families. However, even if they only send food, something will go wrong. It is really useless. Moreover, sinking ships and sinking grain is definitely not something ordinary people can arrange. There were fierce barbarians in front of the northern expedition, and there were such unknown enemies in the back. It can be said that they were attacked from both sides. No one can be happy. With their hearts full of worries, the generals dispersed. In the next few days, although they trained as usual, sent out sentries, and fought anxiously with the barbarians, the soldiers did not know the inside story, but no one was a fool, and they could feel that something was wrong in the atmosphere. Until, 4 days later, someone from the Marquis mansion sent a message. Li Laozi was worried about this matter. In the past few days, he almost lived and ate in the small tent next to the main tent. He was not worried that the Northern Expeditionary Army would be hungry. After all, they had knives and guns in their hands. At worst, he could just fight with the barbarians, take some risks, and rob the barbarians of their cattle and sheep. What he is more worried about is that his family will be anxious about this matter and fall into the trap of the person behind the scenes. Compared to Jiangbei, Zindu is actually more dangerous. There are many aristocratic families and hundreds of civil and military officials, all of whom have 800 ideas. Even if the second brother is shrewd and tactful, Mr. Wen is steady, and there are Lu family and Jia family to help him, no one can be sure and he will not suffer a loss. Fortunately, his family did not disappoint him again. Okay, Li Laozi held the letter and rolled it around on the ground, wanting to jump a few times to express his joy. Second brother and Mr. Wen are really amazing. They actually came up with such a good idea. It's just a 4-day delay. It's absolutely no problem for us. End of this chapter. Dressed as a farm boy, he cheated on his way out of the desert. Author, Delayed Flowering. Chapter 998. Chapter 998. A hand of cards determines life and death. The Marquis also smiled and nodded. In the past few days, he had arranged for people to explore Jingguan City, 200 miles away, where 2,000 barbarians were stationed. Last year, the barbarians drove out the remaining people, planted 1,000 acres of crops, and harvested a lot of food, as well as thousands of cattle and sheep. If there is no good response plan in Zindu, he plans to lead people to attack Jikan. Of course, it is inevitable that a strong attack will cause heavy casualties. So, he would not give an order unless absolutely necessary. They are all flesh and blood, born and raised by their parents. He is reluctant to lose any of them, so it is best to bring all the soldiers back to Jiangnan. Tell the outposts not to go too far into the boundaries of Jingguan City, and wait until the army slowly presses forward, and then we can discuss a solution. The Marquis ordered. We can send the news about our lack of food to the barbarians to induce them to leave the city. Yes, this is a good idea. Li Laoxi's eyes lit up when he heard this. He was about to accept the task, but suddenly changed his mind. Master Marquis, although this second batch of grain has successfully crossed the river, it still has a journey of more than half a month before it reaches our place, and if we can't protect it, the people behind it will take action. I want to take someone to pick it up. It would be better if I can catch the fox's tail. The Marquis pondered for a moment and then responded, well, the news that the second batch of grain is on the way will be kept secret for the time being, and we will wait until it arrives successfully. If you take 500 people to meet the grain transport team, I will say that you are looking for an opportunity to seize the barbarians' grain. Without further delay, I will order my troops and set off. Li Laoxi couldn't hold himself back. Seeing that the Marquis had no objection, he turned around and left the tent. Just as Zhang Chen was coming from a distance, he walked across from him and asked, "What are you doing to be so happy?" "Haha, the Marquis asked me to take people out for a walk. I have to find a way to seize the barbarians' food." Li Laoxi patted him on the shoulder and said with a smile, "Remember to take care of the Marquis. I can go and kill him enemy." After saying that, he hurried away. Zhang Chen had no choice but to laugh or cry as he rubbed his numb shoulders. This guy gets excited whenever he mentions going into battle to kill the enemy. Let's not talk about the Jiangbei camp, but here in Zindu, the military rations were transported smoothly, and everyone breathed a sigh of relief. In addition to Li Laoer, the others also had to keep an eye on the Ministry of War and the Ministry of Household Affairs to collect grain from various states to avoid being delayed indefinitely. Everyone else took a break. Even the emperor held a flower viewing banquet for the imperial concubine, which was very lively. At the banquet, the imperial concubine stole the show by holding the second prince in her arms. The ladies and noble ladies from all the imperial families spoke highly of her and gave her many gifts. Before, Jiyan and the third princess went to the imperial study several times but failed to see the emperor. The third princess lost her temper and refused to accept the rejection anymore. Jiyan thought that the Ministry of War had not found out the murderer who destroyed the army rations, and the emperor did not urge him much. Instead, he focused on women, and she was not happy either. So, a handful of pollen was dropped into the tea, and both she and the third princess got rashes on their faces. Of course there is no need to go to the imperial concubine's flower viewing party. The two of them stayed in Highland Palace, eating fruits and playing on the swings. 2 days later, the concubine's flower viewing party was over, and their rash was cured. The imperial doctors were all confused. They didn't know why the rash came and went away faster. In the end, it could only be attributed to the summer heat. Jiyan was thinking about home, and Muju happened to bring news from outside. It was Beizu's birthday, so he sent someone to leave a message at the Earl's mansion, asking her if they could get together. Jiyan feels a little guilty. She has really neglected this little sister recently. So, she rummaged around in the space for a long time and found a pair of rabbit lanterns. The rarest Bayun gauze in the south is made into rabbit skin, green bamboo is used as the bone, gold thread embroiders the pattern, and rubies are inlaid with eyes. It is really exquisite and lovely. She would definitely like it if it was hung outside Beizu's bed tent at night. The third princess also felt that the palace was stuffy, so she asked Kaiun to find a pair of koyu and put them in a box, and planned to go to Jia's house to play with Jiyan. Everyone in the world has a pair of snobbish eyes. Although the Geo family loves Beizhu, they will definitely choose a good husband's family for Beizhu. But among the little sisters that Beizhu interacts with on a daily basis, if there is an extra princess, her future in-laws will take a good look at her. So, Jiyan sent news to the Geo family in advance. The Geo family was of course also happy, and they raised the standard of Beizhu's birthday banquet a lot. On this day, Jiyan and the third princess left the palace in a carriage, turned to the white clouds, picked up a 2-layered fruit cake, and then went to Jia's house. Mrs. Jia and Beizhu are already waiting at the door. Seeing Jiyan and the third princess get off the carriage, Beizhu rushed forward with a smile and hugged each other. He was extremely happy. The third princess is used to being alone. Even the few friends she had before were not sincere, and they were just perfunctory yes men who agreed with her. Otherwise, after she got close to Jiyan, she would not be so fond of Jiyan and defend him in every possible way. This is because true friends are so rare. And Bao Zuer, this cheerful fat girl, is like a younger sister to her. It is the most comfortable and happy to grab good news and snacks together. So Mrs. Jia was startled, worried that her daughter might bump into the third princess, but the third princess had already hugged the treasure and asked her with a smile on her face what delicious food she had prepared. The three little sisters happily arrived at Jia's garden pavilion. Su 11 and Mei Lan were already there, and even the married Gu Qingqing was there. Jiyan was so surprised that she stepped forward and shook Gu Qingqing's hand. "Sister Gu, it's been so long since I last saw you. How are you always?" Gu Qingqing was also very excited, and she hugged back the good news with strength, but her response was a little reluctant. "Okay, everything is fine with me, I just miss you." Jiyan saw that her expression was aggrieved and sentimental, and wanted to ask a few more questions, but felt that the occasion was not right. Fortunately, Su 11 and Mei Lan also exchanged greetings, and everyone was talking excitedly, so they missed it. Mrs. Jia was a shrewd person. She gave space to the little girls to play, leaving only the capable mother-in-law and maids to serve. Delicious snacks and fruits were set out on the table, and tea and snacks were provided. The little sisters were blowing the summer wind and quickly laid out the playing cards, reliving the sticker contest that was an indispensable part of their party. Mei Lan and Su 11 have both decided to marry their in-laws early, and they will get married in a few months. This is the last free time for girls, so the two of them can play freely. Laugh when you are happy, pout and roll up your sleeves when you are unhappy. Led by them, the others also devoted themselves wholeheartedly and just played a handful of cards into the fierce battle of life and death. In the end, several people became note-takers, and even the good news did not escape them. A few people looked at each other, all holding their bellies and laughing so hard they wanted to roll on the floor. The maids and women outside the waterside pavilion had already lowered their heads and their shoulders were shaking like chaff. But Beizhu did not forget that she was the owner after all. He summoned the maids to fetch warm water, took powder, and took care of everyone to wash their faces and put makeup again, and finally returned to the dignified and beautiful appearance of a noble lady. Soon, the banquet was served again. The girls gathered around. They didn't take a few bites of the food, but poured half a jar of fruit wine into it. Especially Gu Qingqing, drinking one cup after another non-stop. Everyone started to raise their glasses together, but gradually they realized something was wrong. Beizhu is still young and doesn't know what to do, so he looks to the good news as if asking for help. Jiyan stepped forward and snatched Gu Qingqing's wine glass, then gave her a chicken drumstick and said with a smile, "Sister Gu, don't drink all the time. I remember you love chicken drumsticks the most, so I'll fill your belly first." Beizhu is greedy. Her cook has been tortured by her for so many years and his cooking skills are excellent. How about a taste? Gu Qing was stunned for a moment, and looked up to see the doubts on everyone's faces. She suddenly threw away the chicken legs, hugged the good news and cried loudly. Two updates today. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Dressed as a farm boy, he cheated on his way out of the desert. Author, Delayed Flowering. Chapter 999. Chapter 999, Getting Married is a Second Reincarnation. Woo woo, princess, it would be great if I didn't get married. I want to be with you all the time, I want to be so happy all the time. Woo woo, I regret it, I regret it. Gu Qingqing's tears fell down and seeped into Ji Yin's neck, burning her so hard that she was in a daze. Everyone also had their chopsticks stopped in mid-air, wondering what was going on. It was Baozu, the birthday girl, who reacted first and quickly drove away all the maids and women, telling them not to say a word, and then tightly closed the doors and windows of the waterside pavilion. Su 11 and Mei Lan stepped forward to help Gu Qingqing up, thus rescuing Ji Yin. The third princess was a little frightened. She came over and grabbed Ji Yin's hand, with a look of surprise on her face. Mylan has a more stable temperament and has more contact with Gu Qingqing. Now she is afraid that everyone will be unhappy, so she can't help but say a few words on her behalf. Don't blame Sister Gu, her life is really hard originally. Her mother-in-law had passed away and her father-in-law was seriously ill. She thought that life would be easier if there were no elders to interfere with her in the future. Who would have thought that as soon as she got married, she discovered that her father-in-law was pretending to be ill, and soon married a stepmother-in-law. Her father-in-law almost lost all her family property, but she was obsessed with saving face, and the family expenses were huge. Sister Gu was appointed as the head of the household, and she was asked to use her dowry to fill the hole. Sister Gu's husband thinks he has no talent and drinks all day long. Recently he forced Sister Gu to sell her as a dowry to Zhuangzi. When Sister Gu refused, he beat her. Sister Gu's stepmother-in-law also blamed Sister Gu for not having children, and tried every means to chastise her. This time, it was Dean Gu who took her home to stay for 2 days before she had the chance to come over. As he spoke, Mei Lan also wiped her tears as she remembered that she was about to get married. When a woman gets married, she is reincarnated for the second time. If she is unlucky and trusts someone else, the rest of her life will be ruined. Gu Qingqing is definitely not a minority. It's just that some people are willing to speak out, and some people endure it until they die. Su 11 also lowered his head and sighed. The third princess has a hot temper. She has never been wronged since she was a child. She shouted at that time, marrying is not selling yourself into slavery. Why do you have to endure such grievances? Why don't you know how to go back to your parents' home to ask for help? Hearing this, Gu Qingqing cried even harder. Su 11 pulled off the veil and explained in a low voice, the Gu family is a scholarly family with a century-old reputation and very strict etiquette. Let's just talk about Dean Gu. He has been a widow for half his life and has never remarried. In fact, it was not that no one proposed marriage at the beginning, but the family doesn't allow it. Of course Sister Gu also complained, but the family would not support Sister Gu and Li at all. Instead, they urged Sister Gu to help her husband's family as soon as possible, so that the situation would be better in the future. Everyone felt angry after hearing this. They were really stuck in the quagmire and there was nothing they could do. You can't endure it like this. In the end, you'll either be tortured to death, or you'll die of injustice. It's not easy to be reincarnated as a human being, and you're not here to suffer all your life. The third princess stamped her feet angrily. She even said, "Where is your husband's family? I will go back with you and scold them for you." Gu Qingqing's eyes lit up and she was about to speak, but Ji Yin pulled the third princess and stopped her, saying, "No, the princess goes and scolds her. Sister Gu's in-laws may restrain themselves, but the princess cannot support Sister Gu all her life. Furthermore, Sister Gu is a junior and has not given birth to any children. If word spreads, her husband's family won't have to say anything. Everyone will scold Sister Gu for being unfilial and disrespectful, and the princess will also lose her reputation. Hearing this, the light in Gu Qingqing's eyes disappeared again, and her face was full of death. Su 11 and Mei Lan were also frustrated, and Mei Lan choked up, "Why must a woman get married? Can't she stay in her mother's family for the rest of her life?" Bao Zhu was soft-hearted, and she became even more distressed. "I don't want to get married either. It's really terrible. Jiyan doesn't want to wade into troubled waters. After all, things at home are complicated now. But after all, we have been little sisters for many years and we are very close to each other." And from a woman's perspective, she couldn't see it. So, after thinking about it, she asked everyone to sit down and said, "I have some ideas. You can listen to it for now and see if it's feasible." "It's feasible, it's definitely feasible," the third princess was the first to respond, proudly praising, "Jiyan is the smartest, as long as it's your idea, it will definitely come true." Jiyan glared at her angrily and said helplessly, "Don't put your hat on me. I've never been married. It's all nonsense. You should listen to it first." After saying that, she poured a cup of tea to moisten her throat and collect her thoughts. Sister Gu's situation, her husband's family doesn't agree, and her natal family doesn't support it, so it's definitely impossible to reconcile. Then let's think of ways to make divorce and let Sister Gu live a good life. A woman obeys her husband when she gets married, and her son when his husband dies. In fact, in the final analysis, it is still up to the son. Only by having a son can you truly establish a foothold in your husband's family, so let's start from this point. Sister Gu has never been happy. First of all, we need to determine if there is any problem with your body. In this way, if you can still stay at your parents' house for a few days, I will ask my master to diagnose your pulse and prescribe prescriptions to recuperate your body. Gu Qingqing wanted to nod, but when she remembered something, she looked a little embarrassed. She glanced at everyone and whispered, "I want to take good care of my body and have a baby soon. But, that person doesn't come to my room, and I don't like it either." When everyone understood, their faces turned red and they lowered their heads and did not dare to raise them. Jiyan was nonchalant and said, "This is not a problem. You have recovered your health. There are many ways to get him to come to your room. I will talk to you in private. You endure it for a night or two, and after you give birth to a child, you will have someone to rely on for life, and you won't have to accommodate anyone." Gu Qingqing nodded vigorously and clenched her fists. "Okay, I've endured it for so long, and I won't be short of this period of time. There is still a dowry. Those people want to destroy all Sister Gu's dowry. What should I do?" the third princess asked anxiously. "This is easier to handle," Jiyan replied with a narrow smile. "Sister Gu, after you went back, you said that you were taught a lesson by your parents' family. Your parents' family blamed you for relying on your rich dowry and not paying attention to your husband's family, so you took the initiative. Return the dowry to your parents' family for safekeeping, and take the initiative to share the joys and sorrows with your husband's family. You may even reflect on your shortcomings in the past, and just sit back and think about it for 2 months, copying Buddhist scriptures and praying for the whole family. In this way, you will naturally no longer need to take care of the house, and you will not need to supplement the dowry. Then you need to take good care of yourself and go out, right?" Su 11 frowned. It was Mei Lan who spoke up and said, "That will happen in 2 months. It won't matter what Sister Gu does, her husband's family will all come to coax Sister Gu to add money. She is still worried about whether her husband can enter the house. Wouldn't it be much easier to have a baby?" "Yes, yes," the third princess shouted excitedly, "as long as she is pregnant, she will use the excuse that she is weak due to pregnancy and has no energy to take care of the dowry or take care of the house. Until the child is born, and the child is small and has to take care of the child." Su 11 also understood and nodded repeatedly, it's best to let people publicize these things from the beginning. Everyone will praise Sister Gu for being virtuous and talented. There are only two outcomes if we delay this for 3 to 5 years. Either Sister Gu's in-laws can't stand it anymore, and they open up about it, letting everyone find out that they are plotting Sister Gu's dowry, and they will be despised by everyone. Either the whole family pleases Sister Gu, obeys and expects Sister Gu to live a good life. End of this chapter. Dressed as a farm boy, he cheated on his way out of the desert. Author, Delayed Flowering. Chapter 1000. Chapter 1000, 5 little girls can stand up to Zhujiang. It was like a relay race between everyone. You and I managed to arrange everything for Gu Qingqing in the next 3 to 5 years. Finally, they looked at each other, and they both didn't believe each other. Will these methods work? It should be okay, it's not too difficult. Jiyan smiled and made the final decision, praising, "Sisters are really amazing, this arrangement is definitely right, and then all that remains is the execution. It's best for Sister Gu to find a powerful nanny who knows the rules to accompany you. If you don't feel comfortable saying anything, just let her say it. Your in-laws want to save face, so they certainly don't dare to break up with each other seriously, so in the end they will have to be manipulated by you. You'd better be hard-hearted and always remember that no one or anything is as important as yourself." Gu Qingqing's excited eye circles turned red again, and she nodded vigorously. "I will definitely be kind to myself in the future. After all, my husband's family is so greedy and mean. I have no one to rely on, so I can only rely on myself." Everyone felt sad when they heard this, and hurriedly tried to coax him a few words. Beizu arranged for the women and maids to fetch water for Gu Qingqing to wash up, changed the banquet, and invited everyone to continue eating and drinking. Gu Qingqing was several years older than Baozu. She took the wine glass and toasted Baozu in shame. "Sister Beizu, I'm really sorry for disturbing your birthday party. My sister was really feeling bitter and couldn't hold it back for a while. My sister's dowry contains a set of pearls and hair dressing, which is very exquisite. I will send it to you as an apology someday. Don't blame my sister, okay? Beizu is the kindest person, and she shed tears just now. How could she blame Gu Qingqing now?" She stepped forward and hugged Gu Qingqing, and said coquettishly, "Sister Gu, I hope you have a good life. When you give birth to a baby, we will get together and play cards and post notes." Gu Qingqing hugged the chubby little girl and couldn't help but shed tears again. She and Beizu have only met a few times in total, and Beizu still feels so sorry for her. Why can't her family? Perhaps a big thing has been solved, and everyone has learned a lot, and there is a feeling of instant growth. Next, everyone didn't drink much wine, but they had some intimate conversations. Share out any unsatisfactory situation in life, regardless of whether it can be solved or not. In short, I feel much more relaxed. When saying goodbye, everyone hugged each other reluctantly. Jiyan made an appointment with Gu Qingqing and asked her to go to Sujintan tomorrow. Dr. Zhang would naturally diagnose her pulse and prescribe medicine. Gu Qingqing was completely relieved and got into her carriage. All the way home, as soon as I got off the car, I saw my aunt standing at the second door, looking around, obviously thinking about her very much. She hurriedly stepped forward and whispered, "Auntie, why are you out?" Dingu looked at her expression, and the sadness in his eyebrows seemed to have disappeared. He breathed a sigh of relief and said, "It seems that I am right to let you go there today." Gu Qing was stunned for a moment, and then hugged her aunt tightly. Fortunately, there is still someone in this family who loves her. The good news didn't come back to Sujintan, so he went to Bianjian and sent someone back to deliver the letter. He also took 2 boxes of his favorite snacks to Dr. Zhang along the way. Children, coaxing is the best way. As long as Dr. Zhang is made happy, he can agree to anything. Of course, the third princess also unceremoniously prepared 2 boxes of snacks for herself. It was a coincidence that when they went out, they met Luzone. The third princess shouted excitedly, "Brother Lu, why are you here?" Luzone was also surprised and responded, "I was passing by here and wanted to buy 2 boxes of snacks. I would like to put some food on my stomach when I study at night." The third princess's face turned red and she glanced at the good news. Jiyan understood instantly and immediately said, "You guys go upstairs and sit for a while. I just happened to go to the backyard to find Chen 11 to explain something." After saying that, she nodded to Luzone with a smile and went to the backyard. Chen 11 was complaining to his apprentices, "My boss is getting busier and busier. Every time I come here, I come and go in a hurry. I haven't given my boss a taste of the new food I've come up with yet. What should I do? Can't it be sent directly to the palace?" He heard the good news and smiled and said, "Have you thought of something good? Now that you have time, bring it quickly and let me try it." "Oh, boss, you're back again." Chen Zixi was overjoyed and shouted to his apprentices to help quickly. Shui Yun found a clean chair and Shui Ling poured tea. After a few sips of the good news, Chen 11 presented his new product. The white porcelain cup contains brown soup, which is vaguely steaming and exudes a paste aroma, but more of a bitter taste. Jiyan was really surprised and shouted, "Master Chen is so awesome, he actually figured out how to make coffee." Chen 11 was so proud that he nodded repeatedly, "Have a try, boss." I took the coffee beans brought back by the fourth young master, roasted them in 10 plates, ground them into powder, picked the one with the best flavor, and washed it with hot water. Added half a cup of milk and a little icing sugar. It tastes much better this way, it's smooth and fragrant in the mouth, we all like it. I also tried without adding milk and icing sugar, but it was too bitter and I couldn't bear it. Jiyan held the cup and took a sip. It was just as Chen 11 said. Although it is not as professional as those in the coffee shops in her previous life, it is much better than what she thought about at home. "Yes, it tastes good," Jiyan affirmed without hesitation and said with a smile, "The fourth young master didn't get many coffee beans back. The family has to think about planting them, and I don't know if they can do it, so the price of this coffee should be higher. A cup of this would cost 500 cents, and if paired with 2 small cakes, it would be even better to sell it as a set meal. Remember, if any guests want to try something new, be sure to remind them in advance coffee is refreshing, and a cup is as good as a pot of strong tea. It's best not to drink it at night, otherwise you won't be able to sleep." Chen 11 was a little embarrassed and asked in a low voice, "Master, if you say this, the guests may not dare to drink. Do you want to hide it?" "You idiot!" Shopkeeper Peng came in from the outside and happened to hear these words. He laughed and cursed, "These people are all cheap. The more you say you won't let them drink, the more they are determined to try it. If you want this coffee to sell well, you have to say this." "Ah, really?" Chen 11 scratched the back of his head. He thought about how good he was at eating snacks, but when it came to controlling people's hearts, he still couldn't. Shopkeeper Pen was fatter than before. He stretched out his hand to wipe the beads of sweat from his forehead. He stepped forward to salute and said with a smile, "Master, you have come here after a long time. Do you want to check the latest account books?" "Ah." Jiyan looked at the sun outside and said, "Bring me all the account books. I'll look at them when I get back to the palace." Peng Chuan hurriedly responded. Not only did he take the account books, but he also packed an extra box of various candies, which made Shuiling smile. Jiyan ordered 2 cups of coffee with lots of sugar and milk, and took it to the front box to find the third princess and Luzone. As a result, as soon as I walked to the door, I heard the third princess saying from inside, "Brother Lu, getting married is too important for a woman. If you don't get married well, your life will be ruined. When I marry you in the future, can you promise to be kind to me, only like me, and not make me sad for the rest of your life?" Jiyan blinked twice and regretted coming here at this time. This is neither progress nor retreat. Awkward. 2 updates today. End of this chapter.